Hello.
Hello.
So I should just wait a few seconds whilst I get the agenda. I think Graham is intending to join us, and I was going to say, and Akmal maybe as well. Good morning. Just going to give Graham a few seconds, see if he. Cool. Okay, let's just get started. So I've dropped in the MTTP graph, like just a little note on this one. So we've asked Davis, who is, oh, hey Graham, we've asked Davis, who is in the, oh, I'm not sure his team title is. They're the team basically who help us with like analytics and metrics and things. So Davis was the one who converted our weekly MTTP chart, and he turned it into the monthly kind of standardized view for us. So just asked him for some input on how exactly this gets calculated, because there is some kind of interesting stuff. Things I do know about MTTP is we only count MRs on days where there is a deployment. So on the monthly view, at least, the weekend should just be automatically excluded. Family and friends days do just get automatically excluded. But what skews the monthly view a little bit is around the beginning of the month. As it look, I think what it's doing is calculating how many days there are in a month and doing the average across that. So if you find you get long incidents or long blockers very early on in the month, it can skew things quite a bit. So that's what sometimes makes it jump around quite a lot in the first week or so of the month. But I'll come back to you as we get more info from Davis. I'll put something in the release docs so we actually have this documented. Cool. I've added a couple of read-only announcements so you can look through those. And I just wanted to check in on people's thoughts on this one. So there is a DB sharding project taking place. I have to admit, I'm not super close. I need to catch up on it. But one thing I did see as I was scanning through things is there's a new Patroni cluster being created for staging and production. Now, am I right in thinking that we would definitely want something equivalent? I'm going to use the word equivalent, thanks to your comment, Henry, but we would definitely want the same sharded cluster on, definitely on pre, and would we also want it on release?
I'm not really in the details for the sharding plans here, but we never had Patroni clusters in pre or in release or ops, for instance, where we are using Cloud SQL, because we just need a database to run GitLab there, right? And we don't do this kind of, we want to have the same environment like in staging, production, and pre or in release. It's more to be able to test that we can install packages and maybe also test other things around functionality of GitLab itself, but not really to test our infrastructure architecture in this way. So I would be surprised if we would need to set up another Patroni cluster for pre, for instance. I mean, I need to look into what this is for. I mean, if we want to do some kind of switch over from one cluster to another cluster, or if this is for testing, but I guess if it's just about having sharding working at some point in time, then I guess it would mainly be maybe a new Cloud SQL instance, but not.
Yeah,
not
that's what I mean.
cluster,
so
right?
would we, in terms of being able to test, in terms of being able to be confident that the application is deploying and running correctly, it sounds like on pre, at least we would want the concept of a sharded database, right? Regardless of which type of database.
Yeah, but if we want to go to a sharded database, that means at one point we need to migrate from our current database to a sharded database, right? And I don't know what the plans technically are for that. If that really in all cases means we need to switch from one cluster to another one, because that would be really hard for our customers, right? And
it won't be one to another. Well, it will be data. I mean, yes, it is happening. Yes, it's hard, and that's why we've been having these incredibly long post-deployment migrations over the last few months. That's where that's coming from. So I don't have the details. We can certainly find out, but we should consider pre, right? Is what I'm kind of taking from this. Yeah.
Having a like a 30 to 1 second to 1 minute look through the issues. They're calling it Patroni CI. I think it's like they're sharding out the CI data, which probably makes sense because honestly, that's probably the biggest amount of data, right? Like the CI builds table is massive. So I think, once again, just looking at this, the theory would be, I'm not sure if we necessarily need to migrate. What happens is you spin up this new cluster as well, you add it, and then the app will look for the data in the old cluster, like your current DB, but put the new data in the new one and then like combine it. So it's like, I think this is what I'm thinking is it's like an additional database that can be like what we're doing for registry. New stuff can go in there, which circling back means for pre, then we probably do want it. And hopefully it doesn't mean we migrate. We just turn it on. And then when the feature's ready, we just kind of, that's what I'm thinking. We should do a cloud SQL instance. I don't think it's worth setting up the full Patroni for it. But I think we can just get away with setting up another Patroni DB, adding the config, and then just letting the regular deployment cycle kind of figure it out. I think this is, as I said, this is new, but just the way they're talking about it, that's hopefully possible. There also
let me find out. What I was going to actually, this is definitely not a expectation we have an in-depth thing. What I just wanted to drop in there was actually to point out to them, like my assumption is this is not just a staging and production limited thing. Does anyone have a know whether we do anything similar for release? Like my impression is that we don't do stuff for there, right? We just deploy packages on on release. Right?
Yeah. Well, release, I think it's a very simple one node instance, right? With everything running there, even the database, if I remember correctly. So it should be far away from this kind of setup.
Yeah, I mean, arguably pre is the same, right? Like now I'm kind of thinking
pre is a little bit more involved because it has more components, because we wanted to have these kind of components a little bit like split up with different things in Kubernetes and stuff, but we never cared about databases. So we just used Cloud SQL because it's easy to have, and we just need a database. And I think we should stay with that approach. If we need another database, I think we should just spin up another Cloud SQL instance there and should be fine. We shouldn't try to start testing around with Patroni deployments and pre, right?
No, I agree. I'm just thinking, like, surely there must be some support pattern for customers with small install. Like we're saying, hey, you've got a small install, you don't need this sharding.
Yes.
The question is, do we want to class pre under that umbrella? And I was originally like, no, but now I'm kind of thinking maybe yes. Maybe we just want to say pre's too simple. It's not going to have any sharding at all. But then
we use it for quite a lot of testing, though. That's probably what I was thinking, especially if release isn't going to have this sharding. Then it seems like maybe from an application point, not from a database point of view, like, I don't think we particularly.
Sure. So it's not necessarily on size, but it's on that testing, that rubber stamping the functionality.
Probably right. Yeah. Cool. Okay, great. And I'll check in with Pierre as well, because staging ref is also a new fun addition to these sorts of things, in that I don't exactly know, like for now it's low risk because it's not really used for anything, but at some point staging ref does become quite a valuable environment, particularly for quality. And what we haven't yet got is a process for how we get, so staging ref is interesting in that it's built from the reference architectures, which means in a way it's our final environment. So changes, say for example, particularly like infra changes that we do, we would go through pre, then through staging, canary, production, and then after that they become part of the reference architecture, which means then they'd get applied onto staging ref. But for things like, for example, the registry database, the sharded database, and those sorts of changes, like I guess we also need a process to get those onto our staging ref somehow. No, not necessarily us, but as GitLab. So I shall follow up with Pierre. Great, thanks for that. And also I'll have a little close look. It's quite likely that we will want someone from delivery to well, certainly as delivery, we will need to be aware of the progress on the sharding, because at some point it happens and it almost certainly will affect our deployments. But I'll have a check-in on whether we actually need to do more than that. We'll see. We'll see. I hope not, but it possibly. Cool. Great. Is there any other discussion items that people want to bring up?
I wanted to ask about the process for patching. So previously, or for any patches that of the latest release, we simply deploy it to release, I think, or pre-release, I think. So we simply deploy it to release, and that's considered our testing. But is that really equivalent to running an entire QA pipeline? It seems like running a QA pipeline is the more intensive testing.
I think you're probably right. Yeah, I think it probably is. We do have a bit of a gap always on like packaging things for older versions. So for example, like on the security releases, we create 3 packages, but we only test the current one, the current version. So yes, I think a full staging, a full QA pipeline is the fuller way, but even just any sort of anything beyond that, like, you know, even a deployment and checking it stands up is better than nothing.
So technically,
yeah.
I guess we tested the older backports better than we tested the latest backports.
Yeah,
latest patches.
pretty much. Yeah.
So that issue that Will Meek created about allowing a QA pipeline to be run against any version will be useful for all patches, I guess. We could modify our process to run a full QA pipeline.
I think that's a good one. Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm actually hoping in the future that what staging ref may open up for us is the standing up a get environment. And so the way staging ref, well, a little bit like the way get should work is you stand up an environment with you can put a specific package on it and point tests at it. So in the future, that sounds like a pretty good one for any of our kind of patches or security releases, is you'd have somewhere to put them for testing. I think that's the tricky thing at the moment, isn't it? Like for a security release, in a way, we wouldn't want to have to do those in parallel. It'd be great if you could just throw up 3 environments, run the 3 test pipelines in parallel, and then tear the environments back down again.
Yeah, we didn't use GT for get for testing the last few patches either. I'm not sure why.
We haven't got it anywhere. So staging ref is the first internal, properly internal get. Like Quality have been using it for some performance testing, but it's not in any way like fully ready to go. And staging ref is trying to kind of work through the gaps we have there. At the moment, the big thing that we don't have an easy way of doing is actually getting test data. And all the tests rely on data kind of existing already. So there are some pieces that Quality are working on to actually mean you could stand up an environment, you'd have accounts, you'd have test data, and you could also do the testing.
And to be clear here as well, whenever we talk about environments, there's a kind of another big thing we don't really touch upon much, that everything I've seen besides GitLab.com for environments is all omnibus based, right? Like we don't spin up like a pure native installation of GitLab when we do testing or anything. Like we just don't spin up pure cloud native installations of GitLab at all. Yeah, okay.
I don't think we can though. Like, that's not an offering we have at the moment.
I would actually say it'd kind of be kind of the opposite. I'd almost say it's easier to do. I can duplicate environments in Kubernetes quite easily, including Gitly. Like the charts are there to Gitly. They may have rough edges, but it's better than nothing, you know, like the problems would be Gitly pods, you know, like you wouldn't want to do upgrades because you can't do easily 0 downtime upgrades with Gitly and stuff, but spinning up like a full copy of the Helm chart with Gitly and prefect and everything enough to just get you into login page and run some tests for half an hour. It's not something I'm not sure if that's our problem. That's probably more QA space, but I'm just thinking out loud that that's a whole other factor of delivery, like delivery and QA of what we ship, right? That I think we have more of a gap to say that we've tested this. Like we really don't. The testing for the cloud native is not as strong, which is fine. I mean, we probably have less customers using cloud native, right?
I think there are big opportunities here for several use cases because what we do with staging right now is running QA, which is nice, but also mostly trying to test that our production infrastructure architecture is working like it should, right? So this is the reason why we have staging being as equal as much as we can to production, just to be able to also confirm that our chef and everything else, recipes and Kubernetes is working as we want in production. But this is standing in the way to be more flexible to do certain kinds of tests for what we want to do. For instance, do our packages install correctly? This is why we test on release, for instance, or on pre, which could be also done with staging graph, for instance. Then we have a big gap in performance testing. Like, for instance, for registry, all the changes we do for registry right now normally should be tested for performance because we do a lot of database changes right now, and we are not certain enough if database would hold up in production, right? And we can't test this easily in staging. So just spinning up a staging graph or another environment with the newest registry version, a database, and then running some performance tests to see if something changes. All these kind of stuff requires something more flexible than our staging environment right now. So a staging graph or other get environments that we can spin up and turn down would be perfect to close these kind of gaps. So just saying. And so for the reason or the question of Ruben of why we have a release for testing, new patches or packages, just more or less to be certain that we can install the package, right, that we created. This is, I think, the main use case for that. And we could use something like staging graph for that maybe, or some other ephemeral environment.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the motivation that came from quality about staging ref is actually getting so we can spin them up, use them and then tear them down. Yeah, there's lots and lots of use cases. We use staging for lots of different use cases, like you mentioned, actually being able to separate those out. So we have dedicated environments would avoid a lot of the kind of collisions we see. So hopefully we'll see real progress on that. Like staging ref should be the first case. We've definitely hit some interesting stuff there. It's not going to be it's not a trivial environment to recreate, and so that kind of is failing at that point, and that's really because of test data and particularly accounts. Because when you spin it up, you have no one has any permissions on to do anything. So that sort of stuff needs to be scripted. But certainly we're making some progress.
So the release environment can be considered similar to setting up an omnibus instance? Or are there any differences?
Yeah, it's a single node omnibus instance, if I'm not mistaken. It's just an all-in-one, like a very small customer would be the same thing. They would just get one machine, get the omnibus package, do it all in one, the smallest and simplest GitLab installation you can do.
We're also running different GitLab versions, right? Like, so you see some differences as well between our different GitLab instances, depending on whether you have one of the environments is running a community edition. So you get kind of a different view of things that way as well. Awesome. Thank you for asking that. I will go ahead and stop the recording.